I am sharing and promoting a gospel that is different from the Christian gospel. My good news, the one that I want everyone to know, is the good news to be reconciled with yourself. You see, at a deep emotional and psychological level, you got separated, dissociated from yourself. And because of all the emotional neglect and abuse that many of us suffered growing up as children, we have formed a trauma bond with an entity we call Jesus. Because the world wasn't safe for us, right? Our soul did not feel safe in the world. And because of this trauma, we sought out a savior. And the Christian gospel, the Christian story, suited our trauma. It was a good match for a traumatized soul to have a savior into whose arms we could flee emotionally, like an imaginary friend. Before you say it's real, I know it's real. Our psychological mind is a marvelous, marvelous machine. It creates dreams, it creates visions, it creates lifelike, lucid experiences to try and accommodate the needs that we feel in our human body. So many of us have created a trauma bond with Jesus Christ, under the banner of a Savior and Lord. Because that persona provided for us a place of safety that we could emotionally flee into to cope with the pressures of this world. But since it is just a trauma bond, it's not going to heal you at the deeper levels, because healing would require and demand that you outgrow your crutch, you outgrow your dependence on the emotional support of Jesus, of this psychologically created entity, right? In order to heal, you have to become conscious of your psychological deficit, and you have to mature yourself to where you become psychologically stable on your own. And that requires the recapturing of your self-identity. You see, we self-abandoned and disconnected from our soul, and delivered ourselves into the custody of Jesus, right? And while you are in the custody of Jesus, you're not going to do any soul work. You're not going to work on the reasons of why you don't feel safe in this world. So you're going to just cuddle in the arms, in the presence of Jesus, and dissociate from the trauma wound that keeps you triggered and not feeling safe in this world. That's why we want to escape to heaven, because the pressure of this world is just too much to bear for some of us. And we want Jesus to come back. We want him to give us this emotional relief. But it's only really so hard because we're not living with ourselves. We have disowned ourselves, right? We have abandoned self-identity because at an early age we learned that we were bad. We got mistreated, not because we were at fault, but as children we don't have the rational mind developed until in our 20s, and so we couldn't rationalize what was happening, and so we became victims to psychological abuse. And so we believed that we were bad, that we must be bad to deserve this abuse and this neglect. And we don't want to be a bad person, so we dissociated from our self-identity. We dissociated our soul from our mind and became a Christian, right? Because Christianity seemed to offer the solution. There is a God that loves us even though we are so despicable, so unworthy. But that's not the salvation. That's not the solution. You have to unearth these false beliefs of why subconsciously you believe you are despicable and unworthy and undeserving of anything good or undeserving of love. Those beliefs, those shadows, you need to unearth and get rid of them, excavate them out of you so that you can come home to your true identity. So you can come home to your soul and enjoy a whole life, a whole being life, right? That you don't have to loathe parts of you or shun parts of you because you were not loved sufficiently in childhood. So you have to compensate for that now and reparent that small child in you, that inner child, and reintroduce a new self-image that is worthy of love, and then you give yourself that love. That is my gospel. I want you to come home to yourself. I don't want you to remain ashamed of yourself, right? You should feel so at home in yourself as if you were in the bosom of God. That is the gospel. That's the gospel that has transformed me. And that's the gospel that I'm going to keep teaching, preaching, and sharing vibrationally so that you might be whole. That's what salvation means, sozo, to be made whole.